How's it going, everybody? You know who it is. My name is Sun Woo, and in today's video we are going to take a look at the OP-1 Fields sampler engine. And when I say sampler engine, I mean both the synth sampler as well as the drum sampler. So let's start with the synth sampler. This sampler is very simple in that you sample a single note into it and then you can play it chromatically, meaning spread across the keyboard at different pitch intervals, like this. Let's start by sampling our own sound. All we have to do is press the microphone button up here and we are in the sampling menu. Here we have different options of sources that we can sample from. We can sample from the microphone, from the radio, from the USB, or we can sample internally whatever sounds we can hear inside the unit. Also, if I plug a cable into the line input, the microphone will switch to the line input where we can choose from stereo or mono input. But I just want to sample the microphone for now. So let's grab an instrument like the kalimba and set up our recording. First up, you're going to see that this meter goes up every time I'm speaking or every time I play a note. With this knob right here, we can set the recording gain, meaning how loud do we want our recording to be. Ideally, we want to reach quite high without completely reaching the top, so our recording doesn't distort in any way, but it's also not too quiet. So I'm going to try this out again. Yeah, that looks quite nice. Next up, we gotta dial in the recording threshold, and this parameter means that my recording will only start after the input signal hits a certain level. That means it won't start recording if there's complete silence or almost complete silence, but it will wait for the first noise that exceeds this threshold. Let me demonstrate it like this. If I turn the threshold all the way up, and you can see my level isn't touching the threshold, and now I go to record a sample or try to record a sample by holding down a note. And now I'm talking and you can see it is not starting to record yet. It still says standby, which means it's not recording a sample. And that's because my threshold is not being exceeded. If, however, I turn the threshold down like this, and you can see my voice clearly exceeds the threshold, I can hit the sample button and you'll notice as soon as I'm speaking, it's going to start sampling. Sample. As you saw, it started recording immediately when I spoke. Another thing to keep in mind is that the OP-1 will put the original pitch of your recorded sample to whichever key you have pressed when recording. So in order to record, we gotta press one of these keyboard keys. And let's say I press the A key, then it will record my original pitch to the A key. So ideally, if I pressed an A, I would also play an A on the kalimba. If I pressed down the C key, I would press a C on the kalimba, and so on and so forth. So let's play a C on the kalimba, which is why I'm gonna press down the C key here. And I can release if I don't want to sample for all the 6 seconds. Let's get into these controls right here. First up, we've got the start point of the sample. We've got the end point of the sample with the red knob. As you can see, it cuts off quite early when I shorten it like this. But let's put this more to the end again. And then we've got the start and the end point of a loop. That means we can sustain our instrument for however long we want if we set loop points. So let's set the end point of the loop about here and the start point here. And that means my sample will start playing from the very beginning. Then it will play to the gray line. And then it will go back to the brownish line here and go back and forth between them as I am holding down the keys. And you can hear the clickiness right now. That's because there's a volume and a sound difference on the end and at the start of our loop point. That means they sound different, so you hear this transition. If you want to smoothen out this transition, you can press Shift and turn the gray encoder and you see this fade happening. And already this transition is a lot smoother. I can also change my loop points a little bit to try to make it even smoother. And this way I can make an infinitely sustained sample. Depending on which kind of sample you use, of course, this is more or less possible and more or less noticeable, but it certainly does work a lot if you are using this fade parameter. For now though, I want to eliminate the loop, which is why I'm just going to move the loop start point all the way to the end point of my sample. So now I just got the sample in itself. And the other parameters we have here are also hidden under the Shift combo. The first one here is playing the sample either forward or backward if we turn it around, which also can sound very nice. You can clearly hear that the different pitches of my sample are causing the sample to be either shorter or longer. And that's because if you pitch up a note, the sample will get shorter. If you pitch it down, the sample will get longer. So there's no time stretching algorithm in the OP-1 field. But let's play the sample forward again and have a look at the other parameters here. If we have recorded our sample too loud or too quiet, we can change the volume afterwards with Shift and the red knob. So right now my sample will be louder and more quiet. So this is very helpful to get your levels right and also makes it easier to see the waveform if you turn it up a little bit. And lastly, we have the tune parameter right here. And this is useful for example, if I recorded by pressing the C key here, but I actually didn't play a C on the instrument that I recorded. That means my keyboard is now off and the notes are all either too high or too low. And this way I can easily adjust and put the note in its right place. Or I can simply detune my instrument a little bit. Let's say I didn't tune the kalimba before recording. I can correct this afterwards. Yep, and these are already all the parameters for the synth sampler. As you can tell, it's super simple to use, super quick, and therefore a lot of fun to bring your own instruments into the OP-1 field. And of course, you can still change the envelope and the effects as well. Or add LFOs if you want. And now let's take a look at the drum sampler. If for any reason you don't see this screen immediately, for example, if I go to this slot, I've got this screen, and you want to get to the drum sampler, you can press Shift and 1, select drum, and click here. Now you're in the drum sampler. So let's sample our own drum kit. Again, we press the microphone button, and immediately we are greeted by the sampling screen. And now I'm going to record a simple sequence from the OPZ. Now it doesn't matter which key I'm pressing because the drum sampler works in a different way.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1.
So As you could hear, I counted down the numbers from 1 to 16 in an even pace in order to better illustrate how the OP-1 Field's drum sampler slices up the sample automatically. It does it in a way that it takes the whole sample that you recorded and slices it up into 16 even spaces like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
So you got 16 equal spaces up to here, and then you've got 8 equal spaces that are twice as long as these, made from the same sample.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
As simple as that. And this is why it makes sense when, for example, you want to chop up a sample in a traditional way. It makes sense to record a whole 4-bar loop and stop it at the right time, so you get your slice points already well distributed, so you can easily get started playing slices that are somewhat in time with whatever you want to do, rather than recording, I don't know, 7 bars and then having to set each start and end point of these slices manually. So we have these different slices distributed on these keys, but they still belong all to the same sample. The sample can be a maximum of 20 seconds in length, and all we are doing here on the different keys is we are setting different start and end points within this 20-second long sample. So if I play this slice here, you see that we've got this little white part here. That means it's playing this bit of the whole 20-second sample. If I play this chunk, you'll see the white slice will move somewhere here.
10, 10,
or there.
10, 10, 4, 5, 9.
So it shows us which part of the sample we are actually playing. And then, of course, as always, we have different parameters we can adjust. And these parameters are adjusted per slice, not for all the slices at once. That means, for example, if I take this parameter, the blue parameter is the pitch of my sample. I've now pitched down this slice only, but all the other slices
2, 3, 4, 5
are still the same. Only this one is pitched down. So if I want to pitch them down, I have to pitch all of them down manually. And the next parameter is the start point of the sample. And then we have the end point with the gray. Here we don't have separate loop start and end points to the start and end point of the sample itself. So we only have the one start and the one end point for the whole thing. Then furthermore, with the red knob, we can adjust the different play modes of this slice. The arrow on its own means that the sample will only play for as long as I hold down the key. If I hold it very shortly, it cuts off immediately, which is more noticeable if I turn the effect off. So, holding it down, it plays the whole way through. Holding it only shortly, it cuts off. Then the next play mode is the arrow with a line, and that means the sample will always play to the end. Even if I click it just very shortly. And the next one after this is the arrow with the G, and that means that this slice is now in a choke group or in a mute group. If I have two different slices that both have this play mode of the arrow and the G,
11.
That means they are both in a choke group now, and these slices will cut each other off. So if I start playing this one and then play this one, the first one will stop playing.
11, 11, 11, 1, 11, 11, 11, 11.
And the other way around too.
1, 1, 1.
So this is a good way for samples to cut each other off if you don't want them to play on top of one another. And then finally, the last play mode is the loop mode, and this will just loop in between the start and end point of the sample. For as long as you press the key. Alright, now let's get to the shift functions of this sampler. Again, shift and blue will change the playback direction of the sample from forward to backward. Let's put it to forward again. Then we ignore this one for now. We do this last as it's the most complicated. We have an attack parameter, which will give us a slight slope at the beginning, and that can help with eliminating clicks and pops if the sample is not chopped properly. You can hear there's a fade in now at the beginning of the sample. And if the attack is set to 0, the sample will start immediately at full volume. Then next up, again, we can change the volume with the red knob. And again, these changes are per slice, so I only raise the volume of this slice. This one is still at 0. Alright, now to the last parameter, which right now you see there's an L and an R, and that means it's a simple panning parameter at the moment. So if I turn it counterclockwise, my signal will be more noticeable on the left side and more quiet on the right side. And of course, counterclockwise, the opposite happens. But that's not the only function that this button here serves. In order to check out the other function, let me load up a different drum kit, one of the stock drum kits. Yes, let's use the Rhythmobox preset. And here on my snare drum, you can hear that the left side sounds very different from the right side of the audio spectrum. Right now it's still set to L and R, so we can again pan between them. We hear the left side, we hear more of the right side, and we hear everything. But if I press Shift and click the brown knob, this will switch to A and B, and here as well, A and B. And that means we will now hear both of these different samples through the middle, so they won't play on the left or the right side anymore. You can hear them both at the same time coming through the middle. But what you can do now is you can now mix between the different signals. So if I turn this counterclockwise to A, I will only hear the sample on the top. And if I turn it clockwise to B, I will only hear the B sample. So this way I can create interesting layers and make samples that have more possibilities of sound design by mashing two sounds together and then mixing in between them in different ways. So this is a specialty of the drum sampler that the synth sampler cannot do. So I think we covered most of the basic functionality of both the synth as well as the drum sampler. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to learn more about the OP-1 field, about the OPZ and music making in general, don't hesitate to contact me for private online lessons. Link up there or down in the description. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would appreciate a like, a comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to ring the bell. Thanks. Peace.